I mean, you kind of were on the back burner. You were last on the list, and I see that now. I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? But at the time, I thought, well, just get out of my way. If you're not going to do it, let me do it. If you're not, and I think you were shutting down. You were struggling with depression. Welcome to the Turnaround Marriage Podcast, where biblical wisdom and neuroscience come together to bring hope and healing to struggling Christian couples.
We're Scott and Rachel, a husband and wife team whose proven system has helped hundreds of married Christians go from crisis to closeness quickly without rehashing the past.
Each episode, what we're going to do is just share a real conversation. We're going to also share some of God's truth with you each time. And then also, we want to include practical tools to help you rebuild the marriage that you were created for.
Rach, here we are, episode 1, our rock bottom story. And while we're still here, I'm really excited to just connect with you on this level. But also, I'm excited because I know this is going to connect with others that are out there that maybe for a long time they've been struggling, trying to find the answers, maybe even tried some of those helps that haven't worked. And we're really hoping that by building this podcast, it's going to be a source of hope and also just people seeing the real us and also seeing what can be possible for them.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, honey. So, yeah, I think for those of you out there who maybe you're a married Christian and your marriage has been disappointing, it's been pain, it's been conflict, you've grown apart. Maybe you're not happy anymore. We really want to share our story to give you guys hope. So, Scott, let's back up and maybe start in the beginning.
Yeah, we got married, as you know, pretty young, and we knew that the Lord brought us together, and we knew that He had called us into His service in a lot of different ways, as He does others. But we knew that meant in the context of the local church, and we both loved the Lord, but yet we got in a lot of ruts, and it was like we got to the point where we both got really selfish. We didn't really see it at that time. And I just wanted you to like bring peace to the table. And I think you wanted me to love you. And neither one of us was giving to each other what we needed. And we were kind of starving. And there were moments of infusion. There were times that the Lord worked in our hearts, or we went to a retreat or something, or we had a vacation. There's a lot of good memories along the way, but so often we would just revert back, and it was like a lot of cycles of hurt in that too.
It was. It was. I remember the first several years of our marriage, it was like things were really great and we got our graduate degrees and we were serving the Lord and in our careers and enjoying life. But I think the disappointment started
Yeah.
with infertility.
Right.
And then it was like, then we had job changes. We moved across the country several times. We were in new churches and we had to rebuild our lives every time. And those were sweet times and there were sweet seasons, but I think the disappointments kept coming.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere along the line, I thought, like, if you love the Lord and you serve Him, that things should just work out for you.
Right.
And it didn't really feel like that was always the case. And I think both of us kind of got into this mentality of, where are you, God? And we kind of took some of that out on each other.
Right. Yeah, I kind of expected, if you serve the Lord and pastor the way you're supposed to, your church is just going to double in 2 years and everything's going to go easy. And I recognize that there was a lot of external things that were affecting us, certainly, and then many years of trying to have children. And that was really heartbreaking, especially when you did get pregnant and we lost those babies in utero. And that was really hard for us, and we mourned in our own ways, not together like we probably should have. And then when the kids came, we have 6 now. How did that happen? Other than the Lord is good, and 4 grandkids now as well. It's mind blowing, especially since we tried to have kids for 8 years. But you would think that when the children came, that it would get easier, and that wasn't always the case at all.
Yeah. I think, like a lot of couples, we made our marriage so much about having kids. And once the kids were here, it was all about building the family, doing fun things as a family. And our marriage really took a back seat.
Hmm.
And we were dealing with some of those disappointments in different ways. And I think for a lot of couples that are honorable, it's like you're painted this picture of how family should be. You're going to the zoo and you're spending money on your kids and you're getting them involved in activities, and there's like, and you're running around serving your kids, but your marriage your connection, your oneness is like whatever the crumbs or leftovers are at the end of the day. And
Right.
a marriage just is going to unravel if you do that for too long. It just will,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah, and you saw me like dote on the kids, and I'm sure that was in some ways kind of subconsciously hurtful for you because you longed for that as well. And the kids, you were such a devoted mom, and I was like the back seat, and it's not like I needed all of your attention, but it kind of felt like in those cycles that I was, you know, last on your priority list. And functionally, we both kind of treated each other like we were, and so it kind of looked that way. Not that,
I mean, you kind of were on the back burner.
yeah,
You were last on the list. And I see that now. I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? But at the time I thought, well, just get out of my way. If you're not going to do it, let me do it. If you're not, and I think you were shutting down. You were struggling with depression, things like when the stuff really hit, like the housing crash of 2008, we lost so much money. And then, in the midst of having our children one after the other, and then experiencing the joys and challenges of international adoption after that. It's like all of a sudden we went from 0 to 6 kids in 7 years, right?
yeah,
And it was like, "Wait a minute, how do we do this?"
yeah.
And every day felt like, a big challenge.
Yeah. And it was like kind of like it feels like looking back, we were on our own islands, It's
Yeah.
like we weren't letting each other in our own grief, and we almost didn't feel safe to express ourselves. And I know that like it was I would look at your face and I could see the pain in your eyes, and I knew that to some degree I had caused it. I knew I wasn't leading all the time the way I needed to spiritually, and I was causing ripples of pain in your heart, and then it was like being reflected back stronger than a mirror
Hmm.
when I saw that pain in your eyes. And you saw me, I'm like just checked out. I'm running the other way. When there's conflict, I'm not getting engaged with you. I'm disappearing. And I, it's not fun to talk about, but part of that my journey in this was that when a lot of life happened, instead of processing those things correctly, instead of navigating those emotions and the spiritual challenges and bringing them to the Lord and to you, I got very isolated. I got in dead ends. I got to the end of myself. And went to talk to my doctor about it. And here is, oh, these are your depression and anxiety meds. And was on those things for 12 years. They didn't solve anything. Looking back, maybe it got me through a few times here and there, but it didn't solve anything. And then it became almost like my ticket to check out, and it really hurt our intimacy in every way. I don't mean sexually alone. I mean every other way. And it was like, Rachel, you need to back off because the doctor says I have depression. And I was running from you because I saw the pain in your eyes and I was causing it, and I'm just checking out. And you couldn't do anything about it because I had the diagnosis.
Mm. Yeah. And when your husband is depressed, maybe some of you are out there and your husband is just a shell of who he used to be, a shell of who you married,
Yeah.
and you don't know how to pull him out. That's where I was. I was like, why can't you just be happy? Like, why am I not enough? I made it really about me. And then the disappointments as they were piled on, it was like we were thinking of those things from a totally disempowered, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word, a disempowered framework of like, why is this happening to me? And why are these things, God, why are you allowing this? Where are you, God?
Mm.
And, getting to the end of ourselves, it was like, I remember thinking, can we keep going like this? We are just faking it at church. We're faking it in front of our kids. And if you got divorced, what were we going to do then? I mean, because here you are pastoring a church, like what would we do for livelihood? Uh, we couldn't even afford it,
It's
right?
what I was praying for. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And nor can we afford it. And I think we're both too stubborn and we were really too committed. I mean, I remember we went to this one retreat. They were really trying to do all they could to help. They helped pastors and their wives reconnect and all that after a difficult season, and they helped us take this test. And what the test results were so sad. I'm used to making A's on my test, y'all. So
Did not
the
get an
test
A on this
the
test.
test said F, fail in every area of our marriage except commitment. We both scored like 100%. Like we were in it. We were ready to be miserable till death do us part.
Right.
But it was like intimacy, conversation, connection, friendship, fun. Like all those areas were like failing,
Yeah.
failing. And it was like, okay, well, at least we're committed.
Yeah, it's true. And looking back on that, it's it, we could have processed that in a really negative way, which is amazing that we didn't. Like we could have took that to mean, oh my goodness, we're destined to just be a dead end marriage. And that's not God's heart for his people. And I say that because there's a lot of people out there that maybe they went to the help, and I got air quotes going here. Maybe they went for help, and that supposed Christian helper, and air quotes again, said, "Oh, you guys are probably better separated, or you're just destined to struggle and fail. Like you guys are going to be happy separating." Like, and actually, they partner with the enemy to tell them the lies instead of pointing them back to the truth. And I say that just in for us, I'm so grateful that we actually laughed about it. I think that was some
Yeah.
healing as well. But
Yeah.
we did really recognize, wow, this can't keep going this way.
Yeah. And I remember going also to biblical counselors, marriage counselors, Christian counselors, and all he did and all they did were they were very helpful, very nice people. They were, let me say, they were trying to be helpful. They were very
Right.
nice people. They meant well. You could tell they had all their credentials and their education, but it was like talking about your problems and talking about your feelings and going home with no game plan, no
Right.
tools, and no real evidence of change. It
Yeah.
just all it did was it felt cathartic in the moment. It was like, "Okay,
Right.
someone's finally gonna hear me, but I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna ride around on my broomstick again until
Yeah.
I park it in the closet."
Yeah. I remember one of them that we went to, he was supposed to be really well known, and he was a nice guy, but he basically said at one of our last sessions, "Yeah, I pretty much told you that was going to happen, that your, situation was going to get worse at the church and this is going to have a huge toll on your marriage." I was like, "Well, thanks." That didn't really help me at all, right? And
Right.
so often people get to these dead ends, and it's like unloading your problem only to have it pile back on again when you leave is no solution.
Right.
And honestly, I've come to realize that so many of the helps out there don't really help at all. It really is through coaching, which we'll talk about, that I think is the very best framework
Mhm.
because it helps you to shift things significantly.
Yeah. So I remember when we kind of got to the end of ourself and none of the things that we were trying, like the retreats and the counseling and reading books and pointing fingers at each other, like, hey, you should read this book. It'll really help you in our marriage. And, none of those things really did it for us. And so I remember like when our finances were such a wreck because of all the challenges we had faced, that
They
were piled
always
up.
were for a long time. It wasn't like whenever it popped up, it became
That's
piled
true.
on one after another
Yeah,
hits.
that's true. So we were like, okay, I found a financial coach. I'm like, all right, let's just at least work on our finances. Everybody says, oh, people get divorced because of their finances. We're like, all right, let's go. And it was so crazy because this coach, like, he was awesome, but what we discovered the problem was not our finances. We discovered the problem was we were operating in these horrible emotional states of staying stuck, depressed and anxious for Scott, angry and resentful for me, and just operating there. We discovered you cannot solve a problem in those angry, depressed, or resentful or depressed states. You just can't.
Yeah.
And what he challenged us to do is to rewire our thinking and recalibrate our feeling. And we're like, but hang on, our circumstances haven't changed yet. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
supposed to feel differently about this? But it was so crazy as his coaching helped us. We just thought, my gosh, like you can shift
Right.
how you're thinking and feeling, how you're looking at your challenge, and watching the others in the program do that as well. It was like,
Yeah.
man, this is like when you're in an environment where people are up leveling and like they're being honest and they're like reframing their situation. It's like
Right.
we just saw like everything could change, not just for us, but for others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reframing was a huge thing for me because so often we were asking bad questions
Yeah.
like, God, where are you? there's no good answers to bad questions like that, right? The only one that you can possibly come up with in your mind is that God doesn't love you, doesn't care, and is leaving you alone in your own island there. And that's just furthest from the truth. That's exactly what the enemy would want you to believe. And so what Jeremy helped us to do, our coach, was to really shift the perspective. And to me, that was even bigger. Probably the emotional state and the emotional home, that was important, especially with, in the past, depression had been a big piece of the puzzle. But for me, I think it's like, well, wait a minute. This is what your framework that you've been operating from is, but how does that align with the truth of God's word? And sometimes I think men, I mean, ladies need it too, but men really need some from time to time a brother to say, "What are you doing?" And I didn't have people in my life that were really saying that to me,
Right.
and so that's really been helpful. And I think now we both recognize when those unhealthy patterns of thought begin to creep in. So often we were arguing for our own limitations. So often we were arguing for staying stuck. We didn't even realize it that way at that time.
It's true. It's true. And I will forever be grateful for what Jeremy taught us and also helping us to just see like you can build a new life. You can change your situation and your circumstances. You can shift your emotional state. You can change the
Yeah.
meaning of what's happened. And just thinking about the future versus the past. I think that was such a key for me. It was like, okay, what future do we want to build versus where have we been and all these hurts and how do we, reframe that?
Yeah.
And so what has been so amazing and so cool is, I mean, here you had a beautiful career, 20 years of pastoring, ministry, so much fruit over those times, but also hard seasons in there. And for me, I had a career as a physical therapist for 23 years, helping people with their nervous system, learning how to rewalk, rebuild, relearn how to do things after injury or illness. And so, what was so cool is like for us to come together as we saw what coaching could do and what learning to shift your thoughts and feelings could do of building something beautiful to help married Christians go from crisis to closeness quickly.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy that like we've been able to do that.
It is. And part of the story, and there's so many facets of our story, it's hard, obviously, over the many, many years, but part of it was I got really sick and I had to resign my last pastorate, and I couldn't work, I couldn't function. There was a lot of shifting and healing that needed to happen there too. But there was a time that I wondered, I guess God's done with me, right? And that was not what he had in his heart. And so often we say to people when we work with them, like, guys, this isn't a hypothetical for us. We've walked a lot of this. I was talking to a pastor recently, who we have the privilege of helping. And it was like, I know what it's like not to be able to get out of bed and preach. Like, it's not a hypothetical for me. I've been that low before. And and so when we moved to a new location where we live now, we knew we just needed to get closer to family. We knew we needed some healing. But what's amazing is that God has not wasted that stuff. So all those seasons, the stuff that we went through, those hard times, and even that season of like, what are we going to do next? It took a couple years to get our feet back underneath us, and getting here connected with friends and family again. But I think we also had to start thinking correctly. We had to reconnect with our Lord and each other, and that's been so healing.
Mhm. Yeah, it has. And just you as my best friend, Scott, like I just missed you. Like
Mhm.
I missed having fun with you, connecting with you. And it has been amazing as we've had these, learned these new skills, then to apply the biblical wisdom that we know that
Yeah.
you were helping couples with for decades in the context of the church, of couples in your office struggling in their marriage on the brink. And like, so it's like from this new emotional state, when you apply the biblical wisdom that's there for us in the word, and when you soak in it and you meditate on it and you marinate in it, God's word is powerful to
Mhm.
change hearts, to change minds, to change marriages. And we've just seen him do that in us. and continuing to do that in us because you don't ever arrive. It's just a joy to walk with you, hun, and to, you know, become one with you every day in new ways, and then to show others how to do that.
Yeah. It's so cool to think about it, how God has weaved that story together, because we did have a unique, yeah, as you said, training as a therapist, and also the ability to really encourage and coach people. And
Right.
with my theological training, biblical training, to be able to discern what is right, good, and true, and be able to, and ironically, couldn't apply it to myself before that, looking back, I didn't see it then, but I could apply it to other people pretty well, right? And so
Yeah.
being able to see that now, we saw the Lord begin to orchestrate the next steps for us, which was to launch Turnaround Marriage now going on 6 years ago, which is hard to believe it's been that long, where we created, with the Lord's help over the course of many months, something that is really powerful to heal individuals and the marriage at the exact same time. And what's so interesting, a lot of the helps out there, they'll ask, do you want to work on you or the marriage? And I think that's a ridiculous question, because God says you're one flesh. You have to address both. Like, to work on a marriage and not to address the person makes no sense. And vice versa is also true. And I just think it's amazing to see how none of that stuff has been wasted by our God. And it's really cool looking back, because he equipped us for what we get to do now. I never would have picked it. I never would have dreamed that this is what we would do. I would never want to go back and relive a lot of stuff, but I also wouldn't change anything either.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. Our story is wild and it's still unfolding. And
Yeah.
yeah, as we began heavily investing in ourselves to learn how to do transformational coaching, to learn and understand neuroscience and marriage, reconnection, intimacy, the closeness, all of those pieces, and building an online presence, God has just really blessed it. And so, for those of you who are out there and some of this is resonating with you, where your Christian marriage isn't where you want it to be, you've had a lot of disappointments and you've been wondering, why, God? Where are you, God? We hope that our story can bring you hope to see that your story is not done.
Yeah.
If you have breath in your lungs today, God isn't finished with you yet.
Yeah, absolutely. God has great things in store for in his heart for his people. And sometimes people get to that point where they think, oh, not me. They believe, because over the course of many months and years, perhaps, that God's abandoned them. And in reality, they don't realize it, but they're probably pushing God away with the narratives that are in their minds and hearts, and the narratives even in their marriage. And actually, what they're doing is cultivating a garden of weeds, right? It's a garden of unfruitfulness. And they wonder, God, why is there no fruit? Right. And it's because they've cultivated the weeds. And when you help people to see things that way and to really shift, not only their emotional homes, but also to build their minds and their hearts and their marriage on the truth of God's word and his design, not in general, but specific for them, not just in general, but specific for them, it can really set them free. It's amazing that we've seen time and time again where people have amazing turnarounds in their marriage. And honestly, it's usually way quicker than we ever would have dreamed it could be. Am I off base there?
It's wild. It's wild. God has really just, He's a redeemer, right? He can redeem the darkest, most awful thing
Hmm.
that's happened in your marriage or in your life and turn it for good. That is actually a promise. It's not just a cliche. And, I mean, I'm thinking about the verse that God gave us, the
Yes.
passage as we launched Turnaround Marriage. Did you want to share that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the verse that most Christians would know, when Jesus said the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's how we are to love God, with our whole beings. And then he said the second commandment is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And the very first neighbor we have is our spouse. Far be it from me to be a pastor and my ministry to the number one neighbor that I have sucks. Forgive my French there. That's no place to be pastoring from, right? So we realized as well that we're called to love God holistically. I don't mean that in a weird way. I just mean with our being, with our heart, our mind, our soul, our body. And the same thing, we are called to love our first neighbor, our spouse, with that same type of love. Not exactly the same, obviously, but with holistically the whole of our being. That is how we are called to love. And that's the verse that God helped us to launch Turnaround Marriage those years ago. And it's really amazing when you help people in all those different areas, addressing every aspect of our humanity to the best of our ability. It's amazing how much can shift for people. And it's, I've just here in the last few weeks have people have said to me, I never dreamed in 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks that we would have the best marriage we've had in 10, 15, 20 years. It's amazing when you have the right kind of godly wisdom and biblical help that was born out of people that are not just, hey, I'm going to tell you what to do and haven't lived it. Not some snot-nosed kid out of college that knows everything about Freud, right? I'm
Right.
here to tell you the truth of who God is and his love for you, and he's not abandoned you. And I was just saying to you yesterday, I don't get to preach very often anymore, which is one thing I do miss about pastoring. But in some ways I get to not really preach, but interact with great exhortation and encouragement with our clients so that they remember who God is in the midst of the fray, and they remember his love for them when it's been so hard or maybe they've felt forgotten, and to see those heartstrings reconnect between them and God is so rewarding. And I love that part of it, and it's so possible. And rehashing your things that happened when you were 12 and talking about that ad nauseum, and talking about how bad your marriage was 10 years ago or what happened in your previous marriage. It's just like going round and around in a circle. But we forget our God has purpose behind everything. And the goal is not healing in the sense that we've got to retalk these things out or it's not going to affect us in some way. The problem is usually that we have the wrong meaning, and when people find the right meaning behind the things that have happened in accord in connection with the Lord, so many waves of healing can come. And we say all the time, we don't heal, but we know the healer. We do absolutely believe that sometimes we all need somebody to come alongside us and look at things very, very differently. Someone who will love us enough to kick us in the rear, who will love us boldly. And that's where we come in. We don't do the healing, but we remind them of the one who is.
So good. You're bringing it today. Thank you so much for that. So, guys, we're so happy that you tuned in to episode 1 of Bottom